All right, so I am in Calgary, Alberta. It is minus 32 degrees Celsius. That's not including the wind chill. And I'm looking at my mending pile thinking I'm stuck in the house anyways, so I should probably handle this. All right, so most of the mending pile right now is pants. And so there's two problems that I want to deal with right now. The first one that we're going to tackle today is going to be some visible mending. So my husband has this thing that happens to all of his jeans. This happens to all of his jeans right by this pocket. Oh, and it looks like, these might need more mending than I thought because these are turning see-through. But what we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on this hole that's all the way through. And you can see these ones, same deal. I think that's where he often puts his cell phone. And quite possibly at work, it's also maybe where he hangs his tape measure. So either way, this is just like such a common problem for him. So we are going to look at two methods of visible mending today. Now, often when people think of visible mending, I mean, there's lots of like quick hack embroidery videos where, somebody like embroiders a heart over top or something like that of a hole. And my husband's first words to me when I said, I'm going to use your pants to do a video on visible mending. He's like, are you going to put a heart on my butt? No, I'm not going to put a heart on your butt, but I am going to make it pretty because why not? The other kinds of mending that I always think of when I think of visible mending are like the Japanese styles of visible mending, like boro or the shishiko embroidery. Now, some boro is shishiko, but not all shishiko is boro, because shishiko can also be used as embroidery just in and of itself on a garment that you're making from scratch. But as far as I understand, boro literally means rags or tattered cloth or tatters. So really, boro is the art of mending something repeatedly to get as long a life as you can out of it. And it involves using scrap fabric. And I think traditionally this was often done on indigo dyed fabric with a heavy cotton thread. So, it works that I'm using it on denim because, this is probably not indigo dyed because it's probably just not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some boro style mending with a piece of scrap fabric. I'm sure my husband will be super pleased with both. You know what? He's getting his pants mended for him. Beggars can't be choosers. All right, so I'm going to switch to my top-down camera and we're going to work this out. Okay, so here we go. I have these two pair of jeans that are both similarly afflicted with the beside the pocket rip. Now, doing visible mending can be a great time to throw in a fancy fabric, add a little bit of color, add a little bit of uniqueness, a little bit of you, and just really experiment and have fun. However, these pants belong to my husband, so scrap denim it is. As for the thread, really, anything that you might have around for embroidery can absolutely work. I have very different thicknesses here. It kind of depends on what kind of look that you're going for. And really, if you're not an obnoxious craft hoarder like I am, and you're really having an urge to try this right now, several lengths ganged up of regular thread will work as well. The important thing is that when you're doing visible mending, you want it to be seen, right? That's the whole point. So having something that's going to contrast to the fabric that you're using is key. All right, so first things first, I'm going to cut myself a patch, and I want my patch to be quite a bit bigger than the area that the hole is in. Because this is denim and it's going to fray, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the edges just to keep this piece from fraying. It's going to be inside. If you were having it as an outside patch and you kind of wanted that frayed look around the outside, then go for it. But I don't want anything that's going to kind of ball up and be uncomfortable for wearing it. So if you really wanted to, you could just run a zigzag all the way around, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do this by hand. All right, so I'm just using some regular sewing thread for this part, and quick little tip, I have a bar of soap, and if you find that when you're doing hand stitching that your thread gets tangled a lot on you, you can just run it on your bar of soap, and this will help keep it from getting tangled. And unlike using, say, beeswax or something like that, it's just gonna wash out when you wash your garment. So it's not gonna leave any sticky residue or anything, but it will help your thread to not get so tangly. This is gonna be on the inside of the garment, so I'm not really worried about aesthetics here. This is really just for function. Here we are. This is my prepared little patchy piece. Here's the hole, and here's a glue stick from the dollar store. So, I'm gonna load a good amount of glue on here, and this is another thing, it's gonna wash right off the next time you wash the garment. It's completely water soluble, but it will hold everything in place while you are stitching. All right, so this hole has almost come up to this seam, so I'm gonna make sure that my patch kind of goes over the seam, just so I'm getting like maximum strength. All right, now I'm gonna have to wait for this to dry, because it won't be very fun to be pulling my needle through wet glue. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I might as well do the patch for the next pair of jeans. All right, so I'm gonna do these jeans with the patch on the outside. I've already cut my patch to size, and I'm going to glue it on, and I need to catch the corner of the pocket because the hole is like right next to the pocket. I have to be careful that I'm gonna get some strength here. So I am gonna have to stitch through, or at least pick up some stitches through the top of the fabric on the pocket. So I wanna make sure that when I put this patch on, that I'm not gonna go past this seam line, because that's where the pocket opens. And if I go past that, then I'm just gonna create an opportunity for that patch to get pulled at whenever he puts something in his back pocket. So I'm going to make sure that I line it up right with that line of stitching right there when I put it on. All right, now I'm gonna go and wait for the glue on both of my patches to dry, and I'm gonna have a cup of tea. I will be back in a minute. And I'm gonna start with my thread on the inside. Now my first couple of stitches, I'm sort of having to go through a bit more fabric. So I'm just gonna do a couple of individual stitches, and then I'm gonna do a running stitch. If you really wanted to be precise, I suppose you could go and mark some lines with a erasable or washout pen, but I don't know, I feel like the handmadiness of this is like part of the charm. So I've got my first row there, and you can see gone right down the edge. And now I'm going to come right back up alongside. And I think I'm actually going to try and wheel stitch down and then up so that I can kind of try and get my new stitches to go in between the spaces of my old. I think one of the things I really like about this is it's the beauty of it is really in the imperfection. It doesn't really serve you to try and be crazy precise, especially when we get to the one where the patch is on the outside. I mean, you're not fooling anybody. It's a patch. All right, so I've got a bit of stitching going here, and it goes fairly fast. It's a pretty quick process. Now, I knew from the get-go that I wanted to have the stitches over the actual rip to be going crossways, obviously, because that's going to help keep that rip stronger. But I started with them going up and down over here so that we could add some visual interest by having stitches going in the other direction for no reason other than it pleases me. So I'm going to start doing my stitches this way now. One of the things I want to point out too is I'm making sure that I'm getting as close to the edge of my patch as I can. And I'm doing that because I don't want, with wash and with wear, for the corners or the edges to start curling in, because there again, we're gonna wind up with like a little bunch of fabric, which could potentially like rub and be uncomfortable, and nobody's got time for that. All right, so bringing my needle up through this corner right here, because you have to think that the fabric on this edge of the pocket has been folded under, and the fabric on the top of the pocket has been folded under. So there is 4 layers of denim just in this corner, plus the layer of the main part of the pants. So I'm gonna fake it out a little bit just because it's so hard to get my needle through. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring my needle right up in the very corner of the opening of the pocket, so that I can get my thread through. Then I'm going to bring it up this way so that my thread is now on top of that super thick piece. I'm going to just pull my needle through the top layer. And I'm just having to do it on this square, so it'll probably be only 2 rows that I'm gonna have to do that with. Goodness, that's hard. Okay, now I can bring my thread off of that and over the rip. All right, so I'm going to tie off my threads and get them all tucked into the fabric here, and then I'll be done. All right, so there we go. Ends are all tucked in. My patch is secured around all of the edges. And there's the outside. All right, let's take a look at the patch on top version. All right, so I've got my second patch here. My thread is already knotted on the inside, and I've got it pulled out a little bit away from the edge of my patch here. So I'm gonna run a line of stitching all along the top, fairly close to the top of the patch. These ones I'm going to space a little bit farther apart than I did last time, because I'm going to run some stitches in other directions as well. I have all my stitches running this way, and I've brought my needle back out so that it's a little ways away from this last stitch, and it lines up about halfway through the stitch. Now, if you wanted to, you could definitely chalk out a grid or something like that if you wanted these to be like super duper even. I'm not really interested in this looking perfect. I'm interested in looking kind of cool. All right, so I have my thread running in both directions, and now I'm going to start running in a diagonal direction. And the reason why I'm not just turning all of these into little stars or snowflakes or whatever you want to call them is if I do them one at a time, you end up with a lot more bulk of thread behind. Whereas doing a running stitch, you add a lot more strength to your garment, and you kind of keep that bulk out of the back. So here we go. All right, so both pieces are done. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out. I don't know if my husband is going to be, but hey, it's got to be better than the time I repaired his work coveralls with a white sequin and bead flower applique. We'll see. One thing I want to point out is that all the stars around the outside of this, you can see that they kind of wrap the edge of the patch so that we don't have to worry so much about if there's any fraying or anything going on. Like I might get a little bit here, but all in all, those stitches all around the edges are going to totally hold the patch together. Yeah, they're super strong. I don't have to worry about those pockets falling off again. And yeah, that's all there is to it. Well, I hope you liked this tutorial. I hope that it was helpful for you. I think everybody winds up with jeans needing to be mended. Make sure you come back next week and we're going to talk about invisible mending because, well, clearly one of these pairs is going to need that soon. And I have another pair of my jeans that is going to need it. So come back for that. If you did like this video, if it was helpful for you, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I will see you next week. Okay. And my husband, oh, these ones are mine. Wait, that's for the next video. All right, but not all, so hang on, how does this go? What was I saying?